Okay, I am getting the signal that we are live now. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and give a couple of minutes for anyone who is signing on. This is happening from the Therapists Developing High Ticket Intensives group. So super excited for those of you who can make it live today. If you are catching the recording, feel free to let me know as questions come up. Just put them on the kind of comment section of the recording. And if you are here live, feel free to ask any questions throughout this live. I've got a few pre-submitted questions, which gave me inspiration to just come on live to talk about things a little bit more often, because sometimes it's a lot to like type back and forth. There's a lot of like nuances when it comes to like the marketing side of the intensives, the consultation side when it comes to handling intensives, balancing them. A lot of you all are adding intensives onto your weekly caseload. That's definitely how I started as well. And then I started transitioning over time to doing more intensives, less weekly clients. So I want to talk about all of those things with you all so that you, as you're offering intensives, can ultimately do so in a little bit more of like a balanced and an intentional way. Like I am huge on building a sustainable and intentional practice, as opposed to, I've talked with some therapists who are like, I'm seeing 27 clients a week and then doing an intensive this weekend. Like that is working too much. That is the path to burnout. We do not want you to do that here. So I'm going to answer tons of questions again, pre-submitted and live if you're here live, around when it comes to balancing what your intensives look like, what they look like in your practice. So how do we make sure that that still feels good? How can we book some more intensives? So that comes from both a side of marketing perspective. So I'm going to share some marketing things. But then there's also, okay, so you've gotten the people to call, to submit a request form, to book a consultation appointment. How do you actually get the person, now that they are in your universe, and get them into your schedule so that they are a booked and converted client, not just someone who's asking questions about it? So I'll talk about that. And then the hugest thing that I see time and time again, I've seen it and sometimes I still see it in my own practice and from a lot of other therapists, is like, okay, clients love the idea of an intensive, but then there's that sticker shock moment, right? Of like, oh my gosh, it costs that much. So we're going to talk about that too, of if that's their reaction, basically, how are we handling the conversation from there? How can we actually use some of that feedback that we're getting to better inform, okay, so then what are we putting on our website? How are we putting some more information in emails? Again, it comes back to like the marketing, because if done right, you should have a generally like a good website. That doesn't always mean a pretty website, but a nicer looking website helps. But that's not enough. That's not going to be enough to get you a client. We have to have a good web page that talks all about what your therapy intensives are, why they are the thing for people. It's going to list very explicitly the pricing, the benefits, who it's not for, all of that stuff. So all of that's really important. I really harp on, you have to have good SEO, because there may not be as many people going to Google and typing in therapy intensives near me, or couples intensives, or EMDR intensives, or whatever it is. There may not be as many people doing that as there are people searching for anxiety therapy, trauma therapy, et cetera, but there are people out there looking for intensive therapy on Google. And so if you can leverage that on your website so that the people who are ready for it, the people who know that it's going to be a time and money investment and are good with it and ready to go, those are the people you want landing on your website and hopping on a call with you. So I'm going to go to, when did I do this? Last week, exactly a week ago. I put a question up in the group. I'm looking over here on my second screen, of where are you all struggling the most with intensives right now? And so these were some of the questions that, again, are helping to inform what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to make this a little smaller so I'm not looking so far over on the screen. Okay, so overall marketing plan and SEO, I'm going to kind of tie that into a few, in a few different ways as I'm talking about the intensives. But I know for sure a lot of people, let's come to even like the balancing piece, because that was huge for a lot of people of, I've got my current caseload of people I'm seeing weekly, maybe every other week, maybe once a month kind of maintenance sessions people. If you're here live and you are doing a balance, let me know in the chat kind of what that balance is looking like for you of how many hour-long sessions do you have a week? And then if you're doing intensives, how many intensives hours are you doing a week? If you aren't currently doing both, I want you to think about and put in the chat, what is your ideal balance? Like, what does balance look like for you? And I think in part it's a few different layers, right? Of like, what do you even have the time for right now? Because if you do see 20 or 25 clients a week, the idea of even adding on a 3-hour intensive might feel like, well, that's going to push me over that bar, right? That edge of like, I don't know if I have the energy for it. Like, that's what I've seen a couple people say, and some calls that I have with therapists where they're talking about the idea of intensives like sound great and overwhelming at the same time. Like I feel exhausted even just thinking about it. And that's true if intensives, if you feel like there's one way intensives are supposed to be, but there is no one way an intensive is or should be, right? Like my biggest piece of advice for you all adding intensives is going to be, it has to be realistic for you. It has to be something that you're excited about. It has to be something that you can do consistently and sustainably. I've seen some therapists out there offer 5-day back-to-back packages of 6 hours of therapy each day. I could never do that. I can't do 30 hours of therapy a week. That's way too much. But some of you all have the capacity to do that. That's fantastic. So that can be a package that you offer. But if you see things like that out there and you're like, oh man, I can't do 30 hours a week, I can't do 6 hours in one day, then you just don't offer that one, right? That is not the intensive you offer. My one-on-one intensives, I'm doing a max of 3 hours a day, and I offer that in a 1 day or 2 days back to back or 3 days back to back. Most people book a 1 day, so just one 3-hour chunk. Some people book 2 days back to back. I think I've had one person do 3 days back to back. Some people have done 3 days, but done like 2 days and then a next week and then a day. So it's helpful to think about what your personal max is. Don't offer something because you think it's what you're supposed to offer, or you think what people out there want or are looking for. Offer what's going to be realistic and sustainable for you. And so one example, Shelly, that you put in the chat of like 10 1-hour long sessions and then an intensive a week. Great, right? Very, very doable. I, for example, I do this quite a bit if I'm doing couples intensive. So I have a couple intensive this weekend, which for me, my couples intensives are 9 hours. And so I've already been very thoughtful going into this week, planning ahead, knowing I had this intensive this weekend of, my current caseload of weekly, biweekly, monthly people is there's maybe 15 of them. So sometimes like a busy hour-long session week for me is like 10 or 11 people. I'm like, oh, that's a lot of people this week because I normally don't see them that way anymore. So this week I only have I have 5. So it's going to be 14 clinical hours for me for the week. But again, like, right, that was very intentional for me. Like that feels like a good balance between I've got this intensive that's going to take a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of work. It's going to be great. I feel really excited about it. And I know going into it that I can't do that much of the hour-long sessions in the week. So an ideal balance being maybe like 2 intensives a month with 15 individual sessions weekly. That definitely feels really doable too. That's a lot of what I was doing. Initially, I was at like 17 to 20 weekly clients and then doing intensives kind of on top of that. And then the more that the intensives were coming in and felt consistent and predictable for income, the more that actually helped me to pull back a little bit so that, again, now on average, I see maybe like 6 to 8 or 10 of the weekly clients a week with maybe 2 to 3 intensives a month. So definitely super doable. Do you offer programs with set packages for certain preferences? Jackie, let me know what your thoughts are around like specifically, what you mean by like preferences, like your preferences, client preferences, because that'll be helpful for me to give some feedback there. So yes, when it comes to the balancing of them both, so you've got your weekly clients, you've got your maintenance clients, you want to do intensives. I want you to think about right now in your schedule, let's say 5 people reached out to you, all of them wanted intensives, all of them were ready to book. Do you even have time and space in your calendar to convert all of those clients? I think that's helpful to consider, right? Because if you want to do intensives, there is a part of this game where the more therapists that are adding intensives on, which I think is fantastic, I think everyone should at least have like one kind of intensive offering, but the more people that are doing it, the more there is a little bit of this expectation that you can get this person in as soon as possible, because that's a part of what you can market it as is, hey, you don't have to wait on a wait list for months or half a year like you do with weekly therapy. And so if you do have a wait list, so to speak, i.e., I'm so busy with my weekly clients and trainings, and maybe I already have some intensives booked out, it means you kind of have a wait list for intensives, which can look really good from a marketing standpoint of like, look how booked out I am. But it's also going to give that client that sense of like, oh, but maybe someone can get me in faster than that, right? I just had someone email me, it was last Thursday, saying, hey, any chance that you have an availability next weekend for an intensive? And I don't, because I'm already doing another intensive, but people are kind of expecting a quicker turnaround. And number one, that is your boundary to set. If you're like, no, I need at least X amount of time before we have the consult and we actually do the intensive. But I have done that with people before where it's like, we're on the consult call, we're doing the intake the next day, we're doing the intensive 3 days later. Like I've done that before because part of what I did, again, was to be very intentional about I need to make the space in my calendar in order to do intensives. What I don't want you all to do is, again, have your 20, 25, sometimes even 15 feels like a lot for some of us, depending on what's going on in our lives, our individual capacities. So I don't want you to have that and then just be booking every weekend with intensives because, well, I have the time and the money would be nice. I want you all to be thinking, okay, is there one entire week of my schedule where I'm not booking my weekly people, my every other week people? This week is only for intensives. And if no one else books in that, I don't book an intensive, then maybe I can move some of those weekly clients in there. Maybe I'm just catching up on admin. Maybe I just have some time off. Is that every other Friday of the month, I'm only booking intensives. And if there's no intensives, then it's just an admin day. It's a day for consultation, whatever that might be. But I think the more that you can be intentional and looking ahead, then that can be really helpful for, again, making that space in your schedule for when that person comes in ready to book an intensive, you can say, yes, I can get you in next week, right? So super important. So offering 4 to 6 intensives a week, definitely depending on how long it is. Yeah, for sure. Christina, I think I saw that you said you have an intensives only practice. So like that is your focus, right? Like those are the people who are coming to you. They know that's the way to work with you. And clearly you get people in coming for that specifically. I think that decision is so dependent for everyone in terms of, I think once the word gets out there, maybe you have a good network of people referring to you, your clients are referring other people saying like, you got to go see this person. That can be really helpful for helping them be consistent over time. And sometimes it's challenging, right? Whether it's the scheduling, whether it's the sticker shock, whether it's people still don't exactly know what an intensive is and they still need to kind of be sold on it. There's a variety of things and things to consider if you want to run an intensives only model, but it is very doable. There are tons of people, again, who do it. So if that's what you want to do, this can be possible for you. I always encourage people to consider like your finances and where they're at right now. And generally, right? Like if you need the consistent income coming in, it can still be helpful to have some weekly clients in the hour-long model because still that's what people think the norm is. I mean, that kind of is what the norm is. So people will always be looking for that. Intensives kind of, I see them in seasons. Summer actually is usually my busiest season for intensives. Around the holidays tends to be again, but I definitely see some slower times with people reaching out for weekly services compared to intensives. So yes, Jackie, you're wondering if the client or couple is coming in, if I have a set package for where they could complete an assessment depending on, okay, cool. Yes, basically what I have, I used to offer like a variety of packages where I would say for couples, we can do a 1 or 2 or 3 day. For individuals, we can do a 1 or 2 or 3 day that looks like this. I found it from a marketing perspective to be a little overwhelming and kind of confusing for the clients because clients are going to have a lot of questions about, well, what's the difference? What can I accomplish in 1 day versus 2 days? Why would I do 3 days instead of 2 days? And so obviously field those questions as they come up. Even if you take that off from your website, people are still going to have those questions of, I kind of know what to expect from weekly therapy. What about this intensive therapy? Is this something where I'm going to be meeting with you 3 hours every week for the rest of my life? The goal is no, right? So from the perspective of someone lands on your intensive page, if they do see a ton of different package options, for some people that's helpful, right? To kind of see that. For some people, they see that and they make the decision based off of like finances, which is perfectly fine. But that would be your job to have the conversation of based off of clinical needs, here's why I actually recommend the 3 day over a 1 day, even though the 3 day is at a higher price point. So what I ended up doing is for couples now, I only offer the 2 days, mostly because couples like a 2 day kind of cadence is not the right word. They like the 2 day package because 1 day doesn't feel like enough. Not a lot of people can set aside 3 days back to back with time off with kids and stuff like that. So now my only couples package is a 2 day package. And what I say on my one-to-one services is packages start at, and I basically am pitching like the 1 day, 3 hour intensive that includes the intake appointment at least. My price doesn't include the follow-up appointment because not everyone books 1 hour follow-up. Some people book another intensive in a couple months. Some people book like monthly maintenance sessions after that. So for me, it doesn't make sense to include my follow-up as, as a part of the package. So I do have kind of set in my mind, a lot of people come to me wanting to work on trauma. It's usually not single incident trauma. It's usually more complex trauma because that's how I market myself, as someone who helps people recover from complex trauma. And so in those cases, I am saying like, a traditional package is this 1 day, 3 hours. It includes this assessment beforehand where we're going to talk about and go through your paperwork. We're going to talk about what's the goal of the intensive. What are we wanting to focus on? I want to show you what EMDR and brain spotting and IFS and maybe the safe and sound protocol. I do very comprehensive intensives in that sense. So I want to show you what those look like. So we're going to do that for about 60 minutes. And then we're going to spend the intensive session basically going right into doing the work. So I tell them that on the phone of like, here's what the package starts at. And then hearing what their goals are, if they're talking about, I've got this thing with my mom and this thing that I feel like I'll never get over with my dad, and that affects my relationship with my current partner. When I hear a little bit more around like the complexity of how the complex trauma is showing up, that's where I do say like, okay, so from a clinical standpoint, I do think there's a lot of really good work that we can do in the 3 hour session. I feel pretty confident that we can do some work around some of the self-beliefs that come up there around that one memory that you mentioned, kind of desensitizing that, making that not feel so like big and intense anymore. But because there are multiple things, multiple relationships, multiple ways that this is still impacting you today, I would actually recommend we do at least 2 days, maybe even 3 days. And then I just kind of put it out there for clients of like, what do you think? Are there questions about that? And some people will follow like, okay, great. If that's the clinical advice, let's do it. And some people, again, they still want to try the intensive experience. They might be concerned about the cost point. So they might say something like, well, how about we try the 1 day and kind of see how far we can get and maybe just like take it from there. And I say, great, perfect, let's see. Because I really do believe intensives, again, ultimately at the end of the day, they're a chance for accelerated healing and processing. And so I've seen it myself where I'm like, ooh, man, this is going to take, the 2 or 3 days to work through. And I've been shocked with how much the person processes so quickly within like 90 minutes or 120 minutes. So I don't think I think it's hard to predict what someone's going to need, but I think that you can say based off of like experience and my clinical judgment, when something is more complicated, we might want to meet for more time. Also, let's book the one and see how that goes. And oftentimes people have booked a follow-up 3-hour appointment, even if that's like a couple months later. So I think there's lots of ways that offering one package of like it starts at this and then it's tailored to, you know, what exactly you're going through, what your goals are, what your timeline is, what your budget is, we can tweak as needed. From a marketing standpoint, that feels a lot clearer is not the right word, but definitely it feels like less overwhelming of like the client doesn't always know, how do I just pick this package because I think I know what I'm going through, but maybe I don't know what I'm going through. So that's where the consultation is more helpful to talk about the options as opposed to like the web page talking about the options. So I'm glad that made sense, Jackie. Let me know if you have any other questions about that. So yeah, with the balancing of it, it's all about making sure you have the time in your schedule, coming up with kind of a vision, like a couple of you shared in the chat, like your vision of, I would love if I had this many people weekly and this many intensives monthly. So that can be really helpful to have that concrete vision in your mind and align, again, your physical, literal calendar with it. Of if you want a certain day of the week to only be when you offer intensives, then you need to set a boundary around that. And if a weekly client needs to reschedule, you can always say, I can make a one-time exception, but generally I don't see clients on Tuesdays or whatever that day is for you. Or you can just say like, no, I'm not available on Tuesdays. That's only the day when I see intensive clients. So helpful to have those boundaries. And again, to continue to assess for yourself. You know, you might have a vision of like 10 to 15 a week feels really good with this many intensives on top of that. But again, there's going to be seasons of your life where it does feel like you're busy, you're tired, you have family stuff going on, the holidays are around the corner, right? So like that vision may not always match reality, which is totally fine because, right, like visions are about what we want long term and it doesn't always happen month to month consistently across time. But that's where it's helpful to like make that plan for it. For example, I'm taking 2 weeks off in September. I'm traveling. And for me, that meant being very intentional about like, okay, like I can't be booking weekend intensives if I'm traveling this long. I can't be booking X amount of clients per week because I know I'm not going to be able to accommodate, you know, that 2-week break. But it's helpful from my planning perspective that I've planned for, you know, when am I going to schedule those intensives so that I'm still bringing in the income that I need to that month. So let me know, again, if you're here live, if you're watching the replay, if there's any other questions or stuck points that you experience around the balancing of, I want to do the intensives, I also want to do the weekly sessions, and kind of where you're getting stuck with that, because I definitely want to help work through that with you because I think it's a huge thing. My goal is never to be, again, add on intensives and then burn out. The whole point of intensives is supposed to be add them on, bring in a little bit more money, do it sustainably, and like feel really confident because you're doing really good clinical work with your clients. So then the question was around like booking the intensives, right? Okay, so you've made space in your calendar. You're like, I've got all the availability in the world to take on all these intensive clients, but either no one's coming in or they've got that sticker shock. So number one, when it comes to like, how are people coming in or not? That's the marketing question of how are we marketing the intensive services? So do we have a website? Are we mentioning it on our any therapist directories we have, like Psychology Today? Is it a mention in your Google business profile if you have that? Do you network with clients? Are you telling your clients to share with their clients? Like, how are you getting the word out there about your intensives? Because that's going to be huge. If you know me, if you've seen some of my stuff that I post, like I really believe in the strength of a really good website. I am not a networking person. I've never like gone to people and told them like, hey, here's my practice, here's my services, just because I'm introverted and that's not what I do. But people have found me, people have reached out to network with me, and like I'm open to that. But I really do think, because I've seen it possible, if you're only advertising on your website, then that can be really the only way you need to market your intensives, because everyone who books a consultation, they answer a form for me and I ask, how'd you hear about my website? I'd say like 90% of people say a Google search on intensive therapy, a Google search on EMDR, a Google search on whatever it is. Like they're always saying they find me from Google. So that's super helpful to know. Okay, my website is working. I'm going to continue to hone in on the SEO stuff. If a bunch of people were saying, like, I heard from you from my psychiatrist or from my PCP, like, then I might actually be reaching out to people and say, like, okay, like, even though I'm introverted, I'm going to take the effort to reach out and network with that psychiatrist or that PCP. So yes, I hear a lot of people, especially those, right, there's the insurance and the private pay question around, are therapist directories like Psychology Today profiles, are they even worth talking about intensives on? And absolutely they are, because will the type of typical client looking for therapy on a therapy directory be looking for an intensive? No, not necessarily, but that's where it comes back to this piece of like, people may not be looking for, they may not be going to Google and typing in a therapy intensive, but they are looking for help. And that's what a therapy intensive is offering them. I have multiple versions of my Psychology Today. I have one that's geared towards couples therapy. I have one that's geared towards trauma therapy. And then I have a whole different one geared towards therapy intensives. I don't literally have 3 Psychology Today profiles. I'm not paying for 3 profiles per month. I just have 3 different copy versions where I'll cut and paste and switch them up depending on what I want to bring in more of. So if I'm like, I haven't seen a couple in a while, I would love for a couple to come in, then I might put that one up. Or if I mostly just want to focus on intensives, which is where I'm at this point, then I keep that one up. But think about the traditional journey of the client who is on a therapy directory, right? They've probably already done all the filters of, you know, I want to meet with a client, with a therapist who is trained in this, who can see me online or in person, who has this specialty training, who is maybe like queer neurodivergent affirming. Like, people are getting smarter these days and looking for the type of therapist that they want to work with and feel safe with. And again, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for help. They're not necessarily looking for weekly therapy. Some people might. I have had some people be like, I want to do this intensive, but then I also feel like weekly therapy would be helpful. Totally fine. But mostly people are just looking for help. And so I don't know about you, but the last time I've gone to Psychology Today, if I go and pull up therapists in my area, what I see a ton of is not accepting clients, waitlisting for clients, not accepting clients. And that's so defeating for someone looking for therapy to see all these people who have closures or months-long wait lists or an undetermined period of time wait list. And so number one, if they see your profile and you say accepting clients, and they land on your profile and they see, this is the same thing for your website too, and they see basically like you get exactly what they're going through, right? Of here's the struggle, right? You can't even find a therapist to do this work with. You also feel kind of, what's a good word? There's lots of good words, but I'm thinking about ones that, you know, you all might use. You feel kind of like hopeless, you feel anxious, you feel like, what's the point of, it's going to take years to do this work anyway? But what if there was another way, right? What if actually you can do a short, like, deep dive into therapy? What if actually within a matter of a few hours, you could experience more therapeutic progress than you have in the past decade that you've been going to weekly therapy, right? That is going to hook someone in. That is going to make someone be like, what's this person talking about? I want to learn more, right? So then you've got your website linked to it, because there's only so much you can talk about the benefits of a therapy intensive in 600 characters, whatever Psychology Today gives us. So they go to your website and then they read even more about the intensives. So what you are doing is you're not exactly pitching an intensive, you are pitching what the intensive offers them, right? Compared to weekly therapy, here's the benefit of this, right? That you can do a lot of work much faster, that actually you can save more money over time, because even people who are seeing like an insurance, in-network insurance therapist, they still have copays, they still have deductibles, they still have other costs associated with that. Like even a $20 per session copay adds up with time. And there's all the unseen costs of taking time off work, maybe having a higher childcare, paying for parking, gas if they're driving somewhere, train tickets, like whatever it is. There are a lot of costs associated with still going to weekly therapy. And because so much comes up in kind of the like problem of the week style of therapy of like, okay, we were just doing EMDR with this last week. How did that settle? Oh, something totally different came up. And then they start talking about this other thing. I know you all have experienced that with your clients. It makes it really hard to like, okay, we were working on this thing, but we're not making as much progress on it as we could be if that was the only thing we were focusing on, right? If we had 3 hours with this as opposed to 45, 50 minutes, and then a whole week passes by and then other stuff happens and then we come back to it, we're not even here anymore, right? So that's how you need to be selling the benefit of your intensives, is that they know exactly what they want to work through. They know they can work through it, but they know the way they've been trying to do it is not working, right? So you're not marketing, here's an intensive. You're marketing, here's what the intensive offers you, and here's what it can save you. It's actually saving you time. It's saving you money. It's allowing you to have more time in your life where this thing, this disconnection with your partner, this past trauma, this work difficulty, like it's not taking over your life for as long as it would be if you were to go to weekly therapy. And again, some people are going to want weekly therapy, totally fine. The game here is never to be forcing someone of like, you have to do this or you're making a bad decision. It's just, I'm going to give you full informed consent. And the thought is, you know, weekly therapy has its benefits, right? I've done it as a therapist, I've done it as a client. Intensive therapy also has its benefits, and I want to make sure you really understand that before you decide I want to do weekly versus I want to do intensives. So you have to cover all of that in your marketing. A lot of where I've helped some therapists as they're kind of crafting their copy to put on their website, because I have done this on my own website, is to literally even break down the costs, right? Okay, if you were to see me weekly and we were focusing on this, let's say we saw each other for 4 weekly sessions, so you spent about this. We may have made some progress on this goal, but again, like we're still learning about each other and we're talking through these things and you forgot to mention this thing, right? So now you've actually gone through 2 months of therapy and it's cost about this much and you still don't feel like you've made the progress that you've wanted to. Whereas this intensive, where we've got 1 or 2 goals we're focusing on, we're not doing this weekly therapy dance, it costs this much, which might be a little bit more. It might actually be the same amount. It might actually be less. A lot of that depends on how you structure your fees. So I think clients, people who are like analytical, people who think with numbers and logic, they're going to see that breakdown and they're going to really get it, right? Because there's that difference between, okay, you say I'm going to save time, you say I'm going to save money, but when I really think about, okay, if I saw you for 8 weekly sessions and I spent this much and I'm not making progress, but I can see you for 3 hours and pay either the same or less, why would I not try that, right? Like, people are willing to invest in it. It just has to be, we have to speak to the different type of, this is going to be a weird thing to say, but this is true, the different type of buyers out there. Because anyone who works with you, whether it's weekly, whether it's in an intensive model, they're ultimately buying your services, whether they're paying weekly for your time and for your knowledge and your skill, whether they're paying for your intensive services. But there is a whole like marketing psychology, right? And people are at different stages in their buying journey. Some people are going to buy from more of an emotional place of like, wow, this intensive experience, it looks amazing. I've never seen anything like it before. It feels like exactly what I need. I'm all in, right? They go a little bit more with their emotions and they see the possibility of the intensives. And there's going to be some buyers who need the logic, who need the numbers, who need it to make sense and to math. So we have to speak to them too. Because otherwise, if they don't get that, that's a lot of where I see the sticker shock of, whoa, that's way too much money. I've never seen therapy cost that much. What are you doing? You better prove to me that it's going to be worth it, right? And ooh, how uncomfortable is that on a consult call? I've had some people kind of do a little bit of, not grilling, but they've asked some questions and I'm like, okay, well, how long have you been doing this? And how many people have you seen in this model? And I can answer those questions and I answer them honestly. I don't lie. But if I can do that in my website, that makes those conversations on a consult go just like easier and quicker because they've seen the math, they've seen the logic, they've seen the emotional side of it, and they can come in. Christina, yes, you've had the grilling too. So it can happen, right? And I think that there's this huge thing I want you all to remember too, because someone pre-submitted a question, I think it was around this, of like, right? You feel really excited by, okay, I'm going to charge this package. I feel really confident in it. I like the pricing that I put it out at, but I'm really excited about it and no one's buying it. And now it feels like, ooh, should I reduce my cost? Should I actually bring it down? Is it too expensive? And here's the thing is like, I do not want you all to take feedback from people who grill and who question your pricing personally, right? Like when you think about from a trauma-informed perspective, from a parts perspective, like people have all of their own stuff around money. There are people who won't buy a therapy intensive, but they'll spend like $2,000 tinting the windows of their car. There are people who won't spend $3,000 on a therapy intensive, but will fly business class somewhere where they can fly economy or main. So people are going to prioritize how they spend their money. And if they don't prioritize spending their money on this service that can do them really, really well, it's not a matter of you. It's not always a matter of like, you could have marketed it better, because sometimes your marketing game can be perfect and on point and be speaking to a lot of people out there. But if someone's having a reaction to it, if someone is offended by it, if someone doesn't see the value of it, and some people are going to see the value and still not book, either way, in any of those cases, it's not about you. It's not that you did something wrong. It's not that, you didn't do it good enough. It's not that you could have explained more. It's just that that's that person's stuff. And maybe they'll work on it with a different person in a different way. And that's totally okay. Because for as many of the like, oh, heck no, I'm not going to do that thing. That's way too expensive. That doesn't make sense. That's weird. That's wild. Why would you do that? As many of those people as there are out there, there's going to be at least the same amount, probably more, of the people who are like, this is amazing. How soon can I get in? So it has to be a matter of, when it comes to intensives, I think it feels more like sales than like selling your weekly therapy does, because again, it's that high ticket cost that you might put into it. Whether you charge $500 for your intensives, whether you charge $5,000 for your intensives, it's selling it in a different way. And I think like our own stuff can come up with that of like, oh no, how do I justify the price? Like, do I have enough education? Am I skilled enough? And that's important for us to know too, of if it's our stuff that's getting in the way, that makes us feel less confident, that make us feel like, oh no, I really want to say 5,000, but actually maybe I should say 3,000. I don't know. If we've got that coming up, you're the person on the other side of the phone or on the screen, however you're doing this consultation, they're going to pick up on that, right? Because our brains are smart. We pick up on nonverbals, even just like the auditory ones over the phone. And so if we're not fully confident in it, the other person is going to kind of feel that as well. And they may not notice it immediately, but they're going to notice like something feels a little bit off here. So like, oh, let me think about it. And then they don't get back to you, or they think about it and they decide no. And again, totally fine. You are going to have people who say no. You're also going to have people who say yes. So that's really important. I always encourage, again, like reducing your price. You can absolutely do that. That is an option. I don't want you to reduce the price so much that it's basically back to your hourly session rate, because again, now you're just adding more hours when the whole point of this is to work a little bit less and at least make the same amount, if not more, which is very, very doable. So consider your costs, right? I encourage 20 to 50% above your hourly rate. But for some people, they're like, I just kind of want to get the confidence of the intensives underneath my footing. So actually, maybe I'll only do 10% above my hourly rate. So from the client perspective, maybe it seems like it maths a little bit better. But I will tell you, I have done the 50% above. That's what I do for my weekend intensives, because they're weekend times. Those are prime times to be scheduling therapy. It means that I can't schedule like a fun weekend thing because I'm working. When I've done that, I have still had people tell me like, "Oh, you don't charge enough for this. For the value of what you are offering me, for the way that I'm healing in this moment compared to the, again, decades that I've had in therapy before, this is so worth it. You should be charging more." And I took that advice. I did actually raise my rate a little bit after that. And I was at my 50% above. So the right person needs to find you, which is again where I come back to, how are you marketing it? How are you showing up on your website? How are you showing up on Google? All of those things are super important. I know they sound super complex, but they're really not. And it's just about knowing exactly what you're doing and how to do it. Again, when we think about, you all have probably heard of like Again, when I say SEO, if some of you are like, what does that even mean again? Search engine optimization. So how do we optimize your website to be found by search engines? A lot of you, if you know a little bit about SEO, you've heard of like keywords. And I have people ask me this all the time of like, what's the best keyword to use for an intensive? Intensives are still a little bit newer, and SEO really relies on like collecting data over time. And it's not that intensives are like new. There are people who have been doing them for decades. It's just we're hearing about them a little bit more. They're not quite at the level of like pop psychology of like everyone knows about EMDR these days. It's not quite at that level, but more people are hearing about it. But from like SEO world, it's not quite like a keyword you can use quite yet so that people are finding you based off of that. There are, depending on your location, because I've seen in my Google results, people found me by looking for a couples intensive or EMDR intensive. So depending on your location, those might be keywords that you can use and put on your website, or focus on all the other things that are on your website of how do I get people in, right? How do I use like trauma therapist, trauma therapy, couples therapy. If you all are familiar with like the Gottman method of couples therapy, I know they use like marathon sessions as opposed to intensive therapy. So sometimes it's just like tweaking and playing around with different words to get people on there, get people finding your site. So that's a huge thing when it comes to, again, actually getting them booked, as well as I talked a little bit about like managing those objections, right? Like a lot of that has to come from feeling confident in what we're offering, making sure your web page on intensives covers everything that it needs to so that your consultations can basically be a quick vibe check. Like, do I like this person? Can I see myself spending hours with them? Let's talk about scheduling. Might have a quick question about, can I submit a super bill for this? I want your consultations to be that easy, right? Where it doesn't have to feel like you get grilled, you feel anxious, you feel hurt or like rejected because someone doesn't want to move forward with it. So always, always, always do your own work. If you are noticing any of that come up as you're trying to step into the world of getting more intensives booked on your calendar. And again, just to remember, like, we are so used to, as therapists, as providers, as helpers, we're supposed to just charge this hourly fee, right? It's hourly fee for hourly service. And intensive is much more than just a multiple hour service. Intensives are more about value-based services, like the value that you are giving the client by having extended access to a therapist. Number one, like wild. I know there are so many people who use their in-network insurance benefits to see a therapist, and they're like, yeah, I see my therapist for 30 minutes every 6 weeks. That is not therapy. Not for a lot of people. For some people, right? If you're at the maintenance section of like just checking in every now and then, but a lot of people have people start that way in therapy, and there's not a lot you can get done in 30-minute increments every 6 weeks. So even just to have extended access to a therapist, to work with a therapist who is present with you, who is seeing like you've been struggling, and here's this thing that can really help you, that is a huge amount of value, right? So the right clients will see it, the right clients will book with you, because not only do you offer this intensive, but you've made it very clear the value of it and how it can help them and why you want to help them so badly. And then it's just a matter of like personality fit and schedule alignment. There's been intensives I haven't booked because, again, I haven't been able to get them in soon enough, because my work is on not taking every intensive that wants to move forward with me. I have to set boundaries around like, no, that's enough for the month. So that's okay, right? I don't take that personally. Of course, they want faster healing. I can get them recommendations for people who can get them in sooner. So those are the big points that I want you all to think about when it comes to balancing the intensive. So making sure you have space for them, blocking off days if you need to, having that vision of what does balance look like for me. Booking them has to be about having that clear website of everything that is within the intensive. And again, we're speaking not just to the emotional buyer, but to the logical, analytical buyer. And then managing those objections around, when it comes to cost, when it comes to time, when it comes to whatever it is, Your website should do the majority of that for you. And I think there is this piece around like, I think even within the intensive world, some people can struggle with the scarcity mindset of like, there's not enough people who want to do intensives. There are tons of people who want to do intensives. If you happen to find a handful of people every month who are like, this is not for me, that's okay, right? There's been a couple of times where actually I've gone like a full month with no intensives reaching out, and then the next month, like 5 intensive book. So it just comes in waves like that. And that's a part of, I think, again, if you move towards like an intensives only practice, sometimes it's just learning to like ride that wave or to think about other marketing efforts. If you do like networking, that's a great way to get some people who know like this is what you specialize in, this is what you offer. Great opportunities for honing in on your SEO. You can write more blog posts about intensive, more blog posts about the things that you specialize in. You can do Google business profile updates. There's always something that you can do to get people in the door. It just depends on what your focus is and what you want to get more of. So again, if you are here live, let me know if you have any other questions about the things that I talked about today. If you are watching the recording, feel free to put any questions in the comment thread or send me a DM. Let me know how I can be helpful for you, but I'll stay on a couple minutes in case there are any questions that come up. But otherwise, that's all that I have for today. The next live that I'll do will probably be in about a month because again, I'm going on a 2-week trip in a couple of weeks. So life's going to look a little bit chaotic up until then. But yeah, continue to let me know as you have questions. I know there's been some questions around, I think this is one I didn't get to from the thread, insurance-based intensives. The one thing I will always say, thanks for making it, Christina. The one thing I'll say is that always, always, always check with your plan, check your contract, because I might say some things that I've heard have worked for people, and that doesn't mean that is your permission to do it. It means double check and make sure if that's an option for you. So a lot of the therapists who do offer intensives in network, it's not going to look the same as those who are doing it private pay out of pocket. Because if someone's using their in-network benefits, obviously there's the traditional restriction of a 90837 is anything that is above 53 minutes, which is 153 and 553 minutes. So people who do intensives in network might just structure it a little bit differently. Some insurance plans on some tiers in some states, it's that specific, will allow you to bill 2 of the 45-minute codes or 2 of the 60-minute codes, the 53. So 90834 or 90837. Some of them will allow billing 2 units of that. Some of them will not. Some of them will, yeah, you can do it, but we'll only reimburse 1. Some of them will, you've billed 2, we're not going to reimburse you for any. So that's why it's so, so important that you look at your specific contract, you contact a representative to see if that's a possibility for you. Because if it is, fantastic, right? Then you are making at least what you would be making, right? You're not offering a 2-hour session and only getting reimbursed for a 53-minute session. You're at least getting 2 53-minute sessions. That's great if that's a possibility. Obviously, that's lower cost on the client end, but, right, check into that. I will say, even from the out of network perspective, because that's what I do, I will give clients a super bill. I will let them know it's unlikely you're going to get reimbursed 100% of this, but here is what's eligible for the reimbursement, right? The intake session, at least 1 hour of the 3 hours in this one day. And I have had people get reimbursed either just 1 hour of a 3-hour intensive, or I've had people get one person I've done a 3-day intensive with, so it's 9 hours of therapy over the 3 days, got reimbursed like 50% of it, right? So that was a $4,500 package. They got reimbursed 50% of it. So like, that's amazing. That's fantastic. They had already met their out-of-network deductible, and I think their maximum. So it all depends on all the different tiers of plans. So it's just important, you know, what to provide your clients with, like, or potential clients with. Here's the possibilities. If you are in network with insurance, you can ask about, can you bill 2 codes? How does your plan feel about what if you met twice in a week? Like, some people might do a Monday, Tuesday, or a Monday, Friday, as opposed to Monday, 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 Monday. So it can be a little bit more like working intensively as opposed to an intensive. So there are options, but again, do your due diligence and making sure that you're not violating anything in your contract, because also what I don't want you to do is to book like to do all this work and then you only get reimbursed one session or no sessions. Like that feels terrible. I hate when that happens with people who are in network, because you're trying to do a good thing and being inaccessible and then you're not getting paid. Do you end up in a relationship or additional engagement with insurance when doing a super bill? I haven't. I know I've heard some therapists who the insurance company reaches out and is like, we need you to sign this thing, or we want you to release your records, or we need to like consult with you. We need more information about things. I have not done that. I've had in the like year and a half of doing intensives, I've had one company that's reached out. I think they wanted me to sign a W-9, which didn't make sense because they're not paying me, they're reimbursing the client. They wanted me to sign a W-9. I asked questions about it. I was like, why do I need to do this? What does this like establish any kind of like relationship with us, anything like that? This is a client I've done 3 intensives with at this point, so they've invested quite a bit of money working with me. So I did sign the W-9, or I guess I submitted to them a W-9, but they didn't send anything of like, here's a contract, here's an agreement, now we work together, now you're in network, or anything like that. I think it was just, that was their process for, in order to reimburse our clients, we need people to sign a W-9. So I didn't have any problems with it. That is the one time that it's happened, but I've not had to do any like phone calls with people. I have not had to do any submitting my paperwork or submitting like a letter or justification of services or anything like that. So I've been good with that. I know I've heard some people have had some horror stories with that, or at least it sounds like it's more rare for people who do the super bills to have a higher level of engagement with dealing with an insurance company. But obviously when we see that, we freak out because we're like, oh no, this happens all the time. So no, I've been okay with that. Any other questions in the last few minutes for today? I super appreciate those of you who have been here the whole time or popping on or off. I know we're close to the hour mark, which is when a lot of people start to transition if you've got sessions after this. But yeah, any questions, if you're here live, feel free to put those in the chat before we sign off. Or any questions if you're catching the replay, or even if you were here live and you're just digesting some of the information, feel free to, again, reach out via DMs, leave a comment on this video, and I will respond to those as I see them. You're so welcome, Denise. Thank you for coming. Welcome, Andrea. Okay, perfect. I want to assume we're all good. Thank you so much for coming. Like I said, I'll probably put out another poll or just like open Q&A of like, what are questions, where are you all stuck, and probably go live again in another month. So I'll look forward to seeing you all around in the group. Feel free to post questions, post introductions, as some of you all have been doing. It's just awesome to see how intensives are spreading and how you all are helping your clients. So I'll look forward to seeing you all around. Have a good rest of your day. Have a good rest of your week. Bye.